I come from apartheid South Africa. Arriving in your land, the land of Palestine, the sense of déjà vu is inescapable. I am struck by the similarities. In some ways, all of us are the children of our histories. Yet we may also choose to be struck by the stories of others. Perhaps this ability is what we call morality. We cannot always act upon what we see, but we always have the freedom to see and to be moved. I come from a land where people braved onslaughts of bulldozers, bullets, machine guns, and tear gas for the sake of freedom. We resisted at a time when it was not fashionable. And now that we have been liberated, everyone declares that they were always on our side. It's a bit like Europe after the Second World War. During the war, only a few people resisted. After the war, not a single supporter of the Nazis could be found, and the vast majority claimed that they always supported the resistance to the Nazis. I'm astonished at how ordinarily decent people, whose hearts are otherwise in the right place, beat about the bush when it comes to Israel and the dispossession and suffering of the Palestinians. And now I wonder about the nature of decency. Do objectivity, moderation, and seeing supposedly both sides not have limits? Is moderation in matters of clear injustice really a virtue? Do both parties deserve a so-called equal hearing in a situation of domestic violence, wherein a woman is beaten up by a male who was abused by his father some time ago, because he too is now a so-called victim? We call upon the world to act now against the dispossession of the Palestinians. We must end the daily humiliation at checkpoints, the disgrace of an apartheid wall that cuts people off from their land, livelihood and history, and act against the torture, detention without trial, and targeted killings of those who dare to resist. Our humanity demands that we who recognize evil in its own time act against it, even when it is supposedly unsexy to do so. Such recognition and action truly benefits our higher selves. We act in the face of oppression, dispossession, or occupation, so that our own humanity may not be diminished by our silence when some part of the human family is being demeaned. If something lessens your worth as a human being, then it lessens mine as well. To act in your defense is really to act in defense of myself, whether this is my higher present self or my vulnerable future self. Morality is about the capacity to be moved by interests beyond one's own ethnic group, religious community, or nation. When one's view of the world and dealing with others are entirely shaped by self-centeredness, whether in the name of religion, survival, security, or ethnicity, then it is really only a matter of time before one also becomes a victim. While invoking supposedly real life or realpolitik as values themselves, human beings mostly act in their own self-interest, even as they seek to deploy a more ethically based logic in doing so. Thus, while it is oil or strategic advantage that you are after, you may invoke the principle of spreading democracy, or you may justify your exploitation of slavery with a comforting rationalization that the black victims of the system might have died of starvation if they had been left in Africa. Being truly human, a mensch, is something different. It is about the capacity to transcend narrow interest and to understand how a deepening of humanness is linked to the good of others. When apartness is elevated to dogma and ideology, when apartness is forced through the law and its agencies, this is called apartheid. When certain people are privileged simply because they are born to a certain ethnic group and use these privileges to dispossess and discriminate against others, then this is called apartheid. Regardless of how genuine the trauma that gave birth to it, and regardless of the religious depth of the exclusivist beliefs underpinning it all, it is called apartheid. How we respond to our own trauma and to the indifference or culpability of the world never justifies traumatizing others or being indifferent to theirs. Apartness then not only becomes a foundation for ignorance of the other with whom one shares a common space, it also becomes a basis for denying the suffering and humiliation that the other undergoes. We do not deny the trauma that the oppressors experienced at any stage in their individual or collective lives. We simply reject the notion that others should become victims as a result of it. We reject the manipulation of that suffering for expansionist political and territorial purposes. We resent having to pay the price of dispossession because an imperialist power requires a reliable ally in this part of the world. As South Africans, speaking up about the daily life or death for the Palestinian people is also about salvaging our own dream of a moral society that will not be complicit in the suffering of other peoples. There are, of course, other instances of oppression, dispossession, and marginalization in the world. Yet, none of these are as immediately recognizable to us who lived under, survived, and overcame apartheid. Indeed, for those of us who lived under South African apartheid and fought for liberation from it and everything that it represented, Palestine reflects in many ways the unfinished business of our own struggle. Thus I and numerous others who were involved in the struggle against apartheid have come here, and we have witnessed a place that in some ways reminds us of what we have suffered through. Archbishop Desmond Tutu is of course correct when he speaks about how witnessing the conditions of the Palestinians, and I quote, reminded me so much of what happened to us black people in South Africa. I say, why are your memories so short? Have our Jewish sisters and brothers forgotten their humiliation? Unquote. But yet in more ways than one, here in your land we are seeing something far more brutal, relentless and inhuman than what we have ever seen under apartheid. In some ways, my brothers and sisters, I'm embarrassed that you have to resort to using a word that was used earlier on specifically for our situation in order to draw attention to yours. White South Africa did of course seek to control blacks. However, it never tried to deny black people their very existence or to wish them away completely as we see here. We have not experienced military occupation without any rights for the occupied. We were spared the barbaric and diverse forms of collective punishment in the forms of house demolitions, the transfer, the destruction of orchards belonging to relatives of suspected freedom fighters, or the physical transfer of those relatives themselves. South Africa's apartheid courts never legitimized torture. White South Africans were never given a carte blanche to humiliate black South Africans as the settlers here seem to have. The craziest apartheid zealots would never have dreamt of something as macabre as this wall. The apartheid police never used kids as shields in any of their operations. Nor did the apartheid army ever use gunships and bombs against largely civilian targets. In South Africa, the whites were a stable community, and after centuries simply had to come to terms with black people, even if it were only because of their economic dependence on black people. The Zionist idea of Israel as the place for the ingathering for all the Jews, old and new, converts, reverts and reborn, is a deeply problematic one. In such a case, there is no sense of compulsion to reach out to your neighbor. The idea seems to be to get rid of the old neighbors, ethnic cleansing, and to bring in new ones all the time. We, as South Africans resisting apartheid, understood the invaluable role of international solidarity in ending centuries of oppression. Today, we have no choice but to make our contribution to the struggle of the Palestinians for freedom. We do so in the full awareness that your freedom will also contribute to the freedom of many Jews to be fully human, in the same way that the end of apartheid also signaled the liberation of white people in South Africa. At the height of our own liberation struggle, we never ceased to remind our people that our struggle for freedom is also for the liberation of white people. Apartheid diminished the humanity of white people in the same way that gender injustice diminishes the humanity of males. The humanity of the oppressor is reclaimed through liberation, and Israel is no exception in this regard. At public rallies during the South African liberation struggle, the public speaker of the occasion would often call out, "An injury to one," and the crowd would respond, "Is an injury to all." We understood that in a rather limited way at that time. Perhaps we were destined to always understand this in a limited way. What we do know is that an injury to the Palestinian people is an injury to all. An injury inflicted on others invariably comes back to haunt the aggressors. It is not possible to tear at another's skin and not to have one's own humanity simultaneously diminished in the process. In the face of this monstrosity, the apartheid wall, we offer an alternative, and this is solidarity with the people of Palestine. We pledge our determination to walk with you in your struggle and to overcome separation, to conquer injustice, and to put an end to greed, division, and exploitation. We have seen that our yesterday's oppressed, both in apartheid South Africa and in Israel today, can become today's oppressors. Thus we stand by you in your vision to create a society wherein everyone, regardless of their ethnicity or religion, shall be equal and live in freedom. We continue to draw strength from the words of Mandela, the founder of our nation and a hero of the Palestinian people. In 1964, he was found guilty of treason and he faced the death penalty. He turned to the judges and said, and I quote, "I have fought against the idea of white domination, and I fought against black domination. I have cherished the ideal of a democratic and free society in which all persons live together in harmony and with equal opportunities. It is an ideal which I hope to live for and to achieve. But if need be, it is an ideal for which I am prepared to die."